Well, the first opportunity that we had to demonstrate that there were many more dogs than anyone at the time thought would be essentially susceptible and have no immunity to distemper and parvo was in a 2006 outbreak in Chicago, and that was a distemper outbreak. And what we found in that particular shelter, 65% of the dogs coming in had no antibody to distemper. And of course, with a distemper outbreak going on, those dogs were immediately exposed to that virus, and they became infected. And of course, then many of them developed severe disease and died. So we put in place at that time a program that had not been in very many shelters, and that is to ensure that dogs are vaccinated as early as possible. And to me, that meant if there were very many dogs being picked up in the streets, as they were in that South Chicago shelter, we wanted to get them vaccinated on the street. Well, there seemed to be some concern that the animal control people couldn't vaccinate a dog, and that really I don't think should be an issue. I think that if they can't, they can be easily trained to vaccinate, and so that was my recommendation, that they train them to vaccinate, especially with the dogs that were coming in. In that particular shelter, we were finally able to get a program in place where the animals were either vaccinated on the street or they were vaccinated before the doors opened on the van and they were put into the shelter. And after that change was made, that particular outbreak finally came under control. And so that's something to really keep in mind. The other thing that's really important about that early immunization, a lot of people think that you won't develop any antibodies or any immunity 2 weeks after vaccination. Well, actually the vaccines are able to stimulate something that's known as innate or nonspecific immunity that will actually nonspecifically boost the immune system of that animal within minutes to hours after they receive a vaccine. It's not specific, as the name implies, it's nonspecific, but that is very beneficial to that animal, and that's why we do recommend vaccinating as early as possible when that animal is brought to the shelter, if not before it is brought to the shelter. In some shelters, if people come prior to surrendering their animals, you can actually be sure that the animal gets vaccinated prior to the time it comes into the shelter. That would be ideal. And of course it's not very often possible, so vaccinating as quickly after the animal enters the shelter is very helpful in providing some non-specific and then a little bit later specific immunity, and that's what the vaccines are capable of doing.